Okay. Let's see. Pocho, can you see if you go to Team1000words Studios if you see anything? Yep. I'm guessing that we should be live. We should see a cross. Go to Team1000words Studios. It's live. You see the cross? Can you hear my voice? Can you hear me? Are human beings hearing me? Are we out there? Yeah, there's always a delay, so by the time it comes to you, it will be a few seconds late. All right. Yes. Hello, 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 people. Welcome to Team1000words Studios. Today we are going to do lighting for dummies. Yes. So today we're going to look at how we are going to be doing studio lighting, outdoor lighting. The premise for everything is the same. So I think maybe I'll start with a small introduction for the human beings who don't know us here. So welcome to Team1000words. We are a multimedia company in Ghana, and we've been working in the country for over 10 years. And today we're looking at studio lighting. So we are just planning on sharing some tips, some tricks, something to help you on your photographic journey and help ourselves, actually. It's really for ourselves, don't mind us. So, so we'll start with the basic premise of everything that we're doing. And when it comes to lighting, the first thing I think about when I get into a scene is my ambient light. So I will need a human being. Hey, okay, so somebody is saying, what is ambient light? So ambient light is the light you have in the environment when you get there. This is different from natural light. Natural light is any light from a natural source, like the sun or so on. Not an artificial light like a lamp or a flash or something. So ambient light is just the light in the area. I'm sure you're even seeing that in this stream, depending on the sun coming through the window, it gets either brighter or darker whilst we're talking. And because we are using the ambient lights in the area, which is one, the sunlight coming through the windows on the various sides of the studio, and I think there are some fluorescent bulbs that are on, but I mean, compared to the sunlight, they're not really doing anything. And so ambient light is just the lighting in your area. And so therefore, the first thing that I'll always think about when I'm doing lighting is the ambient light. And if I'm going to be using the ambient light or not. All right. And so if it's going to be used, your camera settings have to be in such a way that can make use of the ambient light as well as your flash. When we're going to be mixing flash with the lighting in the area, you need to consider the limitations or the capabilities of your camera, because that's really going to determine how far you can go on either side. From the basic things, from the exposure triangle, looking at your ISO, your shutter speed, and your aperture, those are things that every mid-level to professional camera will have. And so that's not what we're really thinking about. We're really thinking about more of your flash sync speed. If we're going to be lighting, we're going to be using flashes. Now, flashes have a duration, and then they can be set off at a certain time. But the sync speed of your camera is limited by the mechanics and electronics in your camera. And so, for example, the Canon 6D Mark II has a flash sync speed of 180th of a second. The things like the 5D and other cameras, they are about 200th of a second. And so that's really going to be a limiting factor in how you use your flash, unless your flash has something which we call high-speed sync, which allows you to overcome that. And so we'll also look at that a bit later as well, if we're able to head outside. So, okay, so let's start. I will need a human being. Hey, my human being, are you there? Yeah. My human being, go and sit on the chair over there. If we can widen to see both sides, that would be good. So just like no widen. Yeah. All right. Yes. No. Where you are is fine. Okay. So we have today our test subject, who also happens to be a photographer in Team 1000 Words. That's Salome. So what I'll be doing is that I will attempt to not laugh when she's fooling around, so that I can maintain my seriousness. I'll just show you what this camera sees right now. And so now we have Salome on the chair. Let me just add that. So right now, I mean, I'm not really caring about the settings. I just turned it on. Currently, the settings are 1/200th of a second, f3.5, and ISO 1250. And this is giving me a general ambient exposure. I mean, just like this, it's actually not the worst. So if I was going to take a picture with natural light only, I might adjust it. So I may say, okay, let me go down to like 2.8, f2.8, and I think this is relatively okay. So you can look over here, and I can take a shot, one quick shot, and then this is the picture. So I'll say that that's a decent enough image if I just bring that up. Again, I mean, it's a decent image. You can see everything. That's fine. So now the ambient light is what I'm working with right now. I've not added any external lights. I'm just using the light in the area. Now, how do I use ambient lights when I am lighting? What I do is that I use the ambient light to set my shadow levels. To set my shadow level. And so when I'm looking at the image, which I'm looking at right now, I would say that, okay, my darkest areas of the image, my shadow areas of the image, are going to be this particular exposure. And so I would like to adjust my exposure to get the darkest areas that I can. And so in this case, I'm going to say, okay, this picture like this is all right, but I would like it a bit darker if I was lighting in the dark areas. And so, because of that, what I'll do is I'll bring my ISO down a bit. And I'll say, okay, this is how I want my dark areas to look like. So I'll just take another shot. And now this image that you can see here is what my dark areas look like. And so I was like, okay, I'm fine. If the darkest areas in my image is going to look like this, I'm good. So I've set my shadow level. And later on, when we're going to be using multiple lights, we'll see how that works when you're doing multiple lights. Because then when you're setting your shadow level, you'll be doing it with a light instead of the ambient light. But unfortunately, it has just gotten a little darker, but we'll just make use of it like that. So what I'll do is that I will turn on a flash. So for now, I'm just using a small hot shoe flash. This is a Godox TT600. I'm going to put a square softbox on it, and I'm going to use this as my key light. So, of course, my key light is just the light which I'm really going to use to set the mood or the look of my image. So I'll raise it up a bit over her head. And what I usually do is that I look at the light being just a bit, like the center point of the flash would be just a bit higher than the head usually when I'm positioning it. So here, so this is the height of the flash. And so the height of the flash is around the middle of the softbox. So that's just about above the head area, just about here. Yeah, my hand is not straight, but that's how life is. So let me just see, let me set the group of this to A. Let me try and set my flash. Let me see if this is working. Okay, so it's now working. So I'll just take a shot and see. Currently my flash is set to 1/64. I'll just take a picture and have a look. And that's where I am right now. And so if I look at the previous picture, you can see that it's generally dark. Now the light has come in to fill the shadows. And so you can see that the side of her face is light, and then the darker area is the shadowy area, which is what we set with the ambient light. And so now all I'd have to do is to adjust my light until I get the level which I want. So I've increased it just a bit by 2/3 of a stop. Right now I am at 64th plus 2/3 of a stop. And I'll just take a shot and see. And so I am pretty much all right. You want to take a look here? Okay. So over here, you can just see that it's a relatively well-lighted picture. This one we cheated a bit because we are using natural light. At the corner of the image, you can see that we have a very nice rim light that is actually coming from the window. If you can switch to 1. This is coming from the window over here. And so it's almost like we have simulated a 3-light setup just by positioning the window behind her, having the lights here, and using the ambient light in the area to set the shadows. And essentially, that's it. So it's the same technique that will be used for everything. The difference is if we decide to use ambient light or not. So if you decide not to use ambient light, the issue would be, do you have enough firepower to overcome the light in the area? And so if you have flashes which are good enough to overcome the lighting in the area, then you're good to go. Because you're going to need to make sure that you can bring the overall ambient light down to blackness. So let's see if we can do something like that. So I'm just going to turn off the flash here. And so I'll just move this aside for now. And if you can switch to camera 2. So this is my current exposure. Now I want to bring this down. I want to bring my ambient down to black. Currently, my ISO is 500. So I'm just going to drop my ISO down to 100. Now, my ISO has dropped down to 100. It's not showing me the true thing because I have my flash turned on. So I'm turning off my flash. So now you can see what the camera has decided is my current exposure. I'll just take a shot. You can see this is almost black. It's not black enough. So what I'm going to do, not that our test subject is not black enough, but as you can see, she's not that black. But it's not dark enough. You can still see her face. So I'm going to just go to F4. I'm going to look at it. It's not dark enough. Going to F5.6. This is okay. This is almost black. So now it's black enough for you not to see any definable features. I don't think you can see the rim light at the back anymore. And so things are quite dark. To help yourself out, you could decide if you have lights in the place, you can turn them down. If you have windows, you can close the curtains in the windows. And so right now, I'll just take a shot. And this is dark enough. This is dark enough. I mean, we don't need pitch black. Pitch black will give you the best kind of image, and we'll talk about why later, especially when you have movement in the image. So what I'll do now is just set up the lights. Now that I've set my ambient light to literally blackness, what I'll need to do is that I need to get my base level. And so now I'm going to use a flash to get that base level. So I have another one of these flashes which I'll set to group B. And what I'll do is that I'll adjust the power of this flash so that I can get my shadow areas. So I'm just going to turn this on. For now, the other light is off. And what I'll do now is that we can switch to the second camera. I'm just going to take a shot. I don't really check my settings. Hey, right now, did they even flash? No flashing for me. Okay, let me figure out. Okay, my channel is wrong. All right. So I think, hey, no luck for me. All right. These are some of the things that happen. So I can see that the batteries in the flash are no good. And so therefore, they have to be changed. Normally, when you are lighting, you want to make sure that your batteries are still alive so that this doesn't happen to you in the middle of a shoot. But yeah. So I'll just get another set of batteries, which I do not have. Hey, as for this one, I'll now have to start pointing fingers. My batteries. They are not here.
No, they are here.
Okay. So we'll just get a replacement set of batteries. So just to go over what I was saying before, we are now coming to set our shadow level. While I'm waiting, I'll just switch these batteries to that one because that's what I'm going to use first. And then when the other set comes, I'll fill in the other camera flash. All right. So now this should work. All right. As you can see from this very real situation, it's always a good idea to check your batteries and things before you start shooting, but I guess I didn't do that, so. All right. So we're now coming to try and set the base exposure. Okay, so we see that this is slightly brighter than this. Not by much, so I'm just going to pump up the lights. Now for this, I may have to send it a bit far. So right now, that flash is at quarter power. And all right. So now, I think this is relatively all right. I want to cheat a little. These small flashes, they don't have that much power. And so since they don't have that much power, I'm going to cheat a bit. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to double my ISO a bit so that I don't have to run it at its highest power, or else the batteries will die very quickly. So I'm just going to bring my ISO up to ISO 200, and then we will try this again. You will. So let me just show you what it's like without it. So this is at the same ISO 200, and so you can see that there's a little bit of light in the image, but it's not too bad. But these are some of the constraints when you are using a small flash. Just because they don't have enough power, you're going to have to make some compromises. If we move over to the larger flashes, then you'll see that we can decide to make it pure black. We don't have to care about anything. We can just use the flashes to control everything. And so if we go back to this is without, if I go back, this is with. And so I'll just take another shot with this. And so right now, I think for my shadow areas, this is slightly higher than I want. So this allows me to bring the flash power down. I'll bring it down to about 1/8. And now I have set this as my shadow exposure. So this is the shadow exposure. So now all I'll do is add this light again. So this light, which is my A light, is set to, it should be set to 1/64. I'll take a shot and see. And now I have my image. This is with that second light, the one on the top left there, and this is without. And so for this, I would like to add a bit more. Maybe I'll brought it up to 132 and 2/3. Yes, when you make funny faces, it will be captured on the screen. What I'll do is that to increase my exposure a bit, I'll just bring this a little closer to here. All right. So, all right, we can look right here. All right, and so now I have my image, and so it looks relatively natural. Now I can say that, oh, if I don't want the shadow areas to be as dark, now that I've used 2 lights to do that setup, I can now decide that, oh, I can change my ratios very easily because now I am controlling the lighting situation. It's not affected by anything else. And so I can say, oh, when I look at this image, I want the shadow, I don't want the light on her face to be much brighter than the shadow area. So I can increase the brightness of the shadow area by changing the lights that I'm using for the fill light. And so in that case, all I do is, currently that's on 1/8 power. I'm going to bring it up to 1/4 power. And then when I take the shots, I now have brighter shadows. And so the exposure on her face has remained the same, but the shadow areas are much brighter. You can see that it has also affected the wall at the back because the fill light is bouncing around all over the place while the key light is mainly for her face. If I decide that, oh, I've run out of power on my lights, but I want the light on her face to be brighter, all I have to do is just get it a bit closer. Of course, the closer I get it, the less you'll be able to see from the other camera, but you'll be able to see from this one. Is the light going down by itself? All right, let me tighten that up a bit. All right, so taking this shot, so I'll just get a closer shot because I've got the light a bit closer. And then now I have the shot of her face as compared to the other one. You can just get a little bit more brightness by bringing the lights closer. You can have the same effect if the light is further away, if you increase the power of the light. But when you light like this, you now have the freedom of changing the light setup in any way you want because now you are the master of the situation. So now I have this, and I'm like, oh, I like this shot, but I want the light to come to the other side. As long as I keep the light roughly around the same distance away from here, I can now shift this light to this position and take the shot again. So now, of course, I'll just shift my camera a bit because it's being blocked. But now I can take this one. You can't smile small. All right. So now I can change the look. And I know that sometimes what happens with some people is that when you're doing your lighting, you change the position of your lights, and then now you see that, oh, my picture doesn't look nice again. I've moved my light this way. It doesn't look nice. Now things are looking funny. Things are looking strange. It's because you may not be thinking about controlling all the different aspects of lighting together as a single unit. If you're controlling the shadows, you're controlling the highlights, you're controlling the rim all separately, then you can move your lights around within a general area of freedom. Your model could move around. You know, sometimes you can do a lighting setup and your model will turn to the other way. And then now their face is so dark. It's not lighted well. But if you're controlling how the shadows and the highlights and things are, then when they even move, you will not have much trouble. The image will still look pretty good. So in this case, Salome, you can just turn your head this way. You just turn your head to the side. So even by turning to the side, now her face is not looking at the light, but you can see that her face is not in total darkness. Her face is not in total darkness. And so you have that ability to ensure that your pictures still look good. So now that she's facing this way, I'll just move the lights. I'll move the light around to this side. Hey, why you're falling asleep? Oh yes, I know. Some people they are gone. That's okay. So another thing we can do is that, especially for portraiture, the closer you can get the light to your subject, the softer the image will, the light will look on their face. Usually, when I want to get a softbox very close to somebody, I want the person to be close to the edge of the softbox, not the middle, not the front. It affects how the image looks. So what I'm going to do is that I want to see only the effect of this lighting. Because for every light that you use, you want to be able to understand what that light itself is doing in the image. You don't want the lights in your head to be mixing up with the other ones. You want to know, okay, this light is doing A, B, and C. And so I'll show you the difference. If you can shift your chair slightly back. Okay. Yeah. So right now, she is just behind the end of the softbox. So I can literally put my hand between her and the softbox. And so I'm going to see what this looks like. So this image, good. And so for this image, you can see that the light has neatly wrapped around, and you're like, oh, this image by itself doesn't look bad. Why? Because we've already set the light to be at a level that we are cool with. And of course, at the moment, the fill light is not playing much of a part. And so that's off. Now, what happens when you change the position of this light? So I'm going to show you what it looks like when it is positioned right in front of or parallel to the face compared to the camera. So now the flash itself is just around the middle of her head. And I'll take a shot. And it actually changes how the image looks. And so now you can see that it looks like the exposure on her face itself is much brighter, and the other areas look relatively darker. If I go to the previous picture, you could see that the exposure on her face looked more natural. Now, I'm going to do one more shot and then I'll explain the difference. I'm going to put her face at the other end. So now the edge of the softbox is around the area of her face. And then I'll take another picture, and you can see that now it's just the side of her face which is lighted. I mean, if this is the look you're going for, That's great. Now you know how to get it. But in my case, I prefer this image the most in terms of basic lighting, just to get the lighting good from the first try. So here we're not trying to do anything super special, super amazing. We're just trying to get very good and repeatable lighting that does the job over and over again. So now what happened in this picture, you may ask yourself, why does it look so much brighter, the light so much brighter here, when all you did was shift the position? And the reason is because what you are seeing now is not only the light lighting her face, but the reflection of part of the light. And so this is what we would refer to as a specular highlight. And so you are seeing partially the reflection of the light on her skin, which is why it looks white, because the light is white. And in the case of this image, you are seeing much less of the specular highlight. You're really seeing the specular highlights on her forehead, the cheeks, and a bit of the chin. You know, naturally, we produce oils on our skin, and so there's a little reflectiveness. So even though the light was in a position not to give you so much of a specular highlight, you would still get some because of the highly reflective nature of our skin when we have a little oil on it. You can always combat that by using powder. So I'll actually show you what that is like as well. I'll take a shot. Let me put the flash or the softbox back in its original position. So I'm going to put the light back in its original position. Actually, I'll just lower it a bit. Good. And I'm going to take a shot. So you can look at me. All right. So this is where we are now. I think I'll keep it at this. I'll not make any changes for now. And then what we'll do is that, just to show you the difference that a little powder can do. This is, I don't want to do adverts, but this is Casson's Imperial Leather Body Talk. What do you say? Wonderful. So any cheap powder will work. This powder is really cheap. It's not anything expensive. You really just need to use just a little bit. Then you wipe it around so that it's there, and then you can shake it off. All right. So now I become makeup artist. So you put your hand away. So as you can see, I'm doing highly professional work here.
I mean, when you're working with the makeup artist, the makeup artist.
Aha. So as Salome was saying, is that, you know, when you're working with a makeup artist, you don't have to do this. But as you can see, there's no makeup artist in sight. I'm just making sure that, powdering some places, Luckily, her face is not dirty, so everything is cool. You can use it again. All right, so I'll just take another shot and see. All right. So if I look at this picture, you can see that the highlights are a little more defined on the forehead and chin as compared to this picture. It's just a little softer. And so if you can just remove a bit of the oils on somebody's face, you can get rid of a lot of the reflections. But that's all besides the point. So this is the image that we're working with now. Now I'll say, okay, now that I have my key light looking how I want, now I can add in a light to work on my shadows. So I'm just going to turn this flash on again. This is the one that's controlling my fill lights in my shadow area. And I will just get a move on. Let me see what power it's on. It's saying 128, but that's not where I want it to be. All right. So I'm just going to take a shot. And now this is where we are. This one, I feel like this is a little too bright. If you compare it to this, I kind of like the difference between the light and dark. as compared to this image where the shadow area has all been overcome. But because I'm lighting them in two different zones, I can control the shadows and I can control the highlights separately. I can easily just reduce the power. Right now I'm on quarter power on the fill light. I'm going to bring it down to 1/16. When I bring it down to 1/16, I'm able to get a shot like this. My shadow areas have been filled in a bit as compared to this one, and you still have that look of the difference between light and dark areas. And so yes, this is how I'll normally light. If I say that, oh, I want to see her ear a little bit more, well, that's very simple. I'll just increase my fill light flash to now 1/8 power. Take another shot. And now I can see the shadow area more, so I can see her ear better in this case, while maintaining the exposure on her face. And so you can see that as I'm going back through these two images, really the exposure on her face has not changed, but you can see her ear and the area around her ear a lot better in the second one. You can also see that the background is also great. All right, any questions so far? Any questions so far? None? No? Nothing? Nada? Okay, yes.
So in a two light setup like this, can you have a full bright picture where all the full face will be highlighted?
Yes, you can. So all you'd have to do is adjust your fill light and increase it higher. And then you'd be able to even out. So if I go back to this image, this was the image where I had reduced it, but this one was closer to that. So I could have increased the shadows further to get a more plain image where you don't see much of the difference between the light and the dark, and then it will be evenly lighted, completely evenly lighted. But you can adjust it. Another thing that you could do is you could reduce the key light a bit and then increase your ISO. So this is about lighting. So we've looked at lighting using the ambient light as to set your shadow level and adding a light. And then we've also looked at using relatively inexpensive lights as well. Now, what we'll do is I'll switch out these lights for slightly more powerful lights where we can do even more. So, yes. So what I'll do is that I'll remove these ones. So for now, we're just looking at simple 2-light setups. When you want to do a 3-light setup, it's just as simple as adding one more light behind the person. So when we do this setup, we'll just throw in a 3rd light when we are done to show you how easy it is to just add that 3rd kicker light. If you are doing full body shots, you will just need to be quite observant as well, so that the positions of your lights are similar. Another thing is that if you noticed, the fill light, I kept it in front of the person and kind of tilted away. The reason for that was I want to just make sure that I am filling in the image like in a similar manner that if I was taking the picture with the flash on the camera, it would be like. And so if the flash was on the camera and you were taking a shot, just a normal bounce shot, you see that that fill light is a little bit away from the person because it's with you on the camera. And so I put that fill light a little further back and I just bounce it off the roof. All right. Good. So let me change this to B. All right. And that's A, right? Okay. You said? Oh, Okay. All right. So I think we are all right for now. Okay. So we're going to start up again. Yes. All right. So we're just about to get to work and we're going to get started up again. So we're going to do the exact same thing. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to start with the lights. So right now I'm going to go back. So first I'm going to ensure that my image, the ambient light is not playing much of a part in my image. And just take a shot. I'm even going to go up to, let's say, like F8, and I'll bring my ISO down to 100, and I'll take a shot. And that's the image. In fact, the image is so black that you can hardly see anything. If you like, you could even do more, but I mean, you don't really have to do more than that. You don't really have to do more than that. Shutter speed. Aha, so why is it that all the time I'm touching ISO and I'm touching the shutter speed is not being touched, aperture and ISO? The reason is that I'm shooting at the maximum sync speed of my flash. That's 200th of a second. And so if I want to make it darker with shutter speed, it means that I would have to push the shutter speed up to 500 or 600th of a second, which means that I pass my sync speed and I'll have black bands in the image. And so right now I'm just using the aperture and the ISO. So let me test this out. Let me turn this completely off for now. And then what we'll do is that we will set the shadow area using the one fill light. So right now I think it's set to about an 1/8 power. And so far that's where I am. I would like my shadow areas to be a little bit higher, so I can send this up to 1/4. Let me just make sure that it's actually changing. Yes, it is. And I can set this at 1/4. And so I think that for me this is a cool shadow exposure, but now I'm shooting at a much higher f-stop, f8 instead of f2.8 or f3.2 or so before, and my ISO down is down to ISO 100. You always get a cleaner image at the lower ISOs, but nowadays full frame cameras, they're all pretty good. If you're shooting up to ISO 1000, you're hardly going to see any kind of noise in the image anyway. So that whole thing about, hey, when you're shooting in the studio, shoot at ISO 100, oh, shoot at ISO 100. I mean, it's cool, but it's unnecessary. It would mean that you're going to be using a lot more flash power. And so if you're doing a longer shoot, which we do often, your batteries are going to die. So if you think about it like this, at ISO 100, if you're shooting at quarter power, if you just go to ISO 200, you'll be shooting at 1/8. So now you're going to get about double the flashes as you'd get from quarter. So the higher the flash usage, the quicker your batteries are going to die. So, I mean, there's no real necessity to shoot at ISO 100 unless you want the most perfect image quality, and that image quality is wasted on the internet. If you're just going to put your picture up on Facebook, that ISO 100, nobody's going to see it. Maybe if you're doing a 24 by 36 print, maybe you'll have some luck. Okay, so I've added my other flash. I'm just going to try it right now. I put it at 16th power. I take a shot, And this is what I'm getting. So this is not looking too bad. It's not looking too bad. I do feel like there's not much of a difference between my highlight and my shadow. I'll just bring this light a little closer in and a little forward. Yep. And I'll also reduce the power of this. This one, if I remember correctly, was, yes, 1/4. I'm going to bring it down to 1/8, just so that I have a bit of separation between the light and the dark areas. And so there I am. I think I want my key light to be a little brighter, so I'm just going to increase that just a bit by 1 stop. So right now they're both at 1/8. And voila. And so now, when you're shooting, you could decide that you can do many shots. You can just be moving your head small and smiling. You can keep the shots coming. You can keep the shots coming. I mean, I'll go back more to show you, then go in. So now, when I go through the images, you'll see that all the images will be relatively similar. They all have a similar lighting. Even when you go out, you can see that the lighting is similar. I'm shooting in landscape because I'm doing the video. Oftentimes in portraits, you shoot a portrait and then you'll be able to see more. But if I do that, then our whole image will look a little funny. And so that's why I'm not. But let me just take 1 or 2 shots like this so we can see. Don't worry, your eyes are still working fine. This is just a camera that has been turned. So that's it. Of course, I've not straightened up the final image, so it's going to be slanted. But you can see that the lighting is still working. Even though I was concentrating on the face, the lighting on the rest of the image still looks good. And so, yeah. And now at this same place, actually, the fill, you'll see the fill more. Let me go back to shooting this way, even though it's kind of funny to look at. Now you can see that in the previous image, her arm, her hand area where she's holding the phone and things looks a little dark. And so I can put the fill light back up and I can take the shot. So now I put the fill light at 1/4. And so you can now see, if you're comparing the 2 images, if you're looking at the seeds, her hand holding the phone, her hand which is crossed across her lap, you can now see that they're all much brighter. You can see the background is much brighter as well. But we've kept the key light look on the face. And that's about it. We've added the 2 lights. So if we really wanted to add in a 3rd light to get some rim at the back, you can literally just throw one on. I'll just throw on this flash at the back here. I'll set this to group C so that it's just different. Usually I like it to be coming from the opposite direction of where they are facing. So since she's looking at the camera and the light is in front of her, this area is just behind her back. And so I'm good with that position. And then all I'll do is set the power to something low. For now, I'll set it to 1/28. I'll just take a look at the image. I'll take a shot. I can add a bit more. So I'll go to 1/64. 1/64. And now I have a bit of that kicker light at the back. And so if you're looking at that image, you can see that things are looking pretty good. You have a bit of that rim light. You could decide to do more if you liked, but this is actually good. So I'm quite happy with where the image is looking at this point, and I think we're good. And so essentially, this is the lighting for dummies that I was talking about. It's so simple. Once you've done this, you're good. You are good. So let me just switch this back to the other side so that you can see it. Well, I'll just zoom in a bit. And this is a close-up shot. And you have a bit of that kicker light at the back. And you have your shadow area, you have your highlight area, and everything is looking good. So essentially, that's about it. So when you're shooting, you look at your ambient lights if you're only going to be using one flash, because you're basing everything off your ambient light. So let's say you go to, you're at a wedding reception, there are lights in the area. You just set how you want your darker areas to look by taking the pictures without flash, and then you add the flash. So in this case, what we did after using the ambient light and adding one flash is that we brought the ambient exposure down to darkness, so it's almost black. It doesn't have to be perfectly black, but almost black is good enough. And once you've gotten to that position, you now use a fill light. There are different ways of using fill lights. I've just gone for the easiest and lowest common denominator. We are in a room with a white roof and bouncing off the ceiling. You could also put this in a softbox at the position of the camera, so that the light is coming from the direction of the camera. So either just behind or just in front of the camera, just above the lens, or even just below the lens, and it will light up the scene in a way that is even. Actually, I could literally try it out, but maybe I'll do that another time. So you set your shadow exposure by using your fill. Then you use your key lights, you add it in. You can move it around, you can do it above or below or to the side, however you want it. And then for fun, you can just throw in a third light, and then you get your final image. So I guess that's how to do simple lighting. You know, when you do that, you don't really have any issues. This kind of lighting is always good, and I use it as a starting point when I'm shooting. You know, you just want to be able to get a good image right off the bat. Using this method, you can get a good image very quickly. And so you can start with this, and then you can get more creative afterwards. Once you've gotten the shots that you know look good and everybody is happy, then you're good to go. So thank you very much for wasting your time and listening to me like this. I'm sure we will come back again and try things out another time. All right. Oh, everybody's clapping for me. Oh. All right, people. I shall see all of you another time.